Good afternoon. Welcome to the Language of Excellence podcast. I'm your host, Nick Nighbor. And in this show here today, you're going to learn about how to take your ideas in your head and put them on paper with the help from Emily Crookston. Let me go ahead. I'm going to get her on the screen here. And welcome to the show, Emily.
Hi, Nick. It's great to be here. Thanks for having me.
Yes, great to have you. And this is really the first time that we've spoken here today, but I really like your tagline. You are a ghostwriter for rebels, renegades, and mavericks, helping entrepreneurs, business owners get their thoughts on paper, but then also help grow their business. Correct?
That's right. Yeah. I love working with people who have maybe disruptive ideas within their industry, or they have really strong opinions about a certain way to do certain things, and I love to help them sort of talk to their audience about that stuff. Yeah.
Awesome. So tell me a little bit about your journey into writing.
Sure. Yeah. So I used to be a philosophy professor, hence the pocket PhD.
Okay.
And, when I was ready to leave academia, I thought, well, I liked marketing when I was 13. So I started putting out some feelers, and a friend of a friend was looking for marketing help, and she has a web development company. So her clients needed blog posts. She needed blog posts for her website. And so I sort of started out ghost blogging. And I realized that I had a kind of knack for, I like to think of it as translating expert ideas for, a lay audience, or people who aren't necessarily experts in your field. And at a certain point, I said, well, I can also do longer projects. So I started writing books as well. So most of my business now these days is ghostwriting books and editing books. But I also do some blogging along with my LinkedIn content creation services.
So you have your hands in quite a few different things, but a lot of it is surrounded with taking someone's idea, and then turning that into something, turning that into a business, turning that into a story for someone to be able to see that. So writing is really, really hard to do. I went to school for journalism, and my degree is more of an emphasis in public relations, but I still had to do copywriting and research. Has that been easy to you? Is that like a natural skill, or is that something that you've worked on over the years?
It's a good question. I definitely have worked on it over the years. I think what I realized in starting this business is that business writing is kind of technical writing. It's a very much straightforward, here's my, my argument or my opinion on a certain topic, and here are my reasons for backing it up. And, there may be a room for, well, you might think of this, you might have almost an objection to some of the things I'm saying, and here's my response. And that's exactly the format I used in philosophy to write philosophy papers. So it was interesting to see how that translated into the business world. And of course, it's a different level of writing, and there's less jargon when I'm doing it right and all of that. But yeah, it was interesting to see the similarities. And my own writing style was always very conversational. In some academic circles, it was considered too conversational, not scholarly enough. But that turned out to be an advantage here, because I can listen to you as the business owner tell me about this topic, and I can say, oh, what would your audience really want to hear about this? What's interesting to them? And then I can just play with those thoughts until I get to a nice piece of writing that they'll grab onto. So that's the way I look at it.
It's so interesting what you do, because even if somebody, I had an author that's been writing a blog post every single day for the last 10 plus years.
Wow.
Like he's got over 5,000, and they're like 1,000 to 1,500 words each blog post. So he's been doing that for a long, long time. And obviously he's been working on his craft. So number one, just to be a writer is like really hard. I think a lot of people don't really understand that until they're actually, I have kids, I have a high schooler and an 8th grader, and they have to write papers. They're like, oh, this is so annoying. I'm like, well, you're not even, you have to come up with like 4 paragraphs. But to actually write a book or write a paper or something persuasive is really hard. Now, what you do is you're actually on the next level, is you're talking to someone that has all these ideas in here, You're trying to pull these ideas out, and then you're helping put that on paper. Like that's a whole other set of skills, isn't it?
Yeah, it definitely is, and it's a lot about taking it in. I mean, going back to the translating idea, taking it in, digesting it, processing it for myself, understanding it, and then putting it back out into a way that I think their audience could understand. It's really fun, and it's part marketing, it's part writing. It's all of these kind of skills wrapped up into one. And what I think is interesting is every business owner, every salesperson has to create content, right? This is it's pretty much impossible to have a business without marketing yourself in that way, in writing, in fact. But the amount of brain power it takes to do it well is not something we all have time for all the time, which is, why I think my service of ghostwriting is such a good thing to be able to offer to people. It's such great service because there's so much of a need for great content. And, of course, we can all complain about, the ballooning of content and how much is out there and, how much people are writing that's probably in a lot of ways unnecessary. But if you can do it well, and if you can stand out in that way within your own industry, then it can really be a great way to get to know people, connect with people.
And it's a great way. I think not every, you had mentioned business owners. Like I firmly believe that every single person has a story to tell.
Oh yeah.
Like everyone's story is unique. Everyone's background, experiences, the things that they're going through. It's all very, very unique. I mean, yes, there's a lot of books written every year, but I mean, if everyone wrote a book, like there's so many stories, so many lessons. I mean, I got a couple bookshelves behind me. I've read probably 400 to 500 books in the last 10 years.
Yeah.
So like I'm a very big reader, but there's clues to be had from people. And the really cool thing, what you do, and I don't know if this is like an after effect of someone after they write their book, but I feel the more someone can tell their story, the more they can communicate it, the better they understand themselves and how they're helping their marketplace. Because instead of like, hey, I'm a roofer, I help people put roofs on their, like, okay, like that's like a traditional business, but you mostly work with people that need to create content, get the attention out there. And the better that they can communicate their message and their story, like you're helping them with that, aren't you?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. It's really interesting because, these are sort of the hidden values of being able to write and even working with a writer to get your story out. You really have to know your stuff to be able to write about it. It's almost as if you're educating your audience as you're doing it. And so, in fact, you're almost creating demand through the writing that you're doing, and I think that that's one of the most interesting and fun parts of the job. And people don't realize that, whenever I talk to somebody who wants to ghostwrite a business book, for example, my first question is always, what's the business case for this book? Because if you think you're going to make $1 million off book sales, you're probably mistaken about that. Unless you're a best-selling author on the New York Times best-selling list, you're not going to make $1 million selling your books. But there are a lot of benefits and values to writing that are, almost hidden values, right? You like you mentioned, the clarity that comes around your brand from getting it there, but also there's, prospects who will read your book and then want to work with you. There's speaking engagements and opportunities that are only available to people who have books, things like that pop up as well. And I always encourage my authors to think through, all the benefits of it. Yeah.
And that's changed over time. 20 years ago, if you were an author, you just wrote, there was thousands of authors getting thousands of books published every year. Only a small portion are becoming best-selling authors. Now today, like you look left, you look right, like how many people have written a book? I was actually just handed a book 2 weeks ago by a friend of mine, someone that does, he's building a community to help real estate agents. So that's part of his business strategy is, hey, read my book. Then he's able to communicate his principles, his structure, and then he leads them to that process. I mean, the great thing about a book is like once you have someone purchase it, like the physical book or like an ebook, like, boom, all right, now you have another subscriber to your email list.
Yes,
Someone else
too.
you can stay in touch with, correct?
Right.
Would you say more of the books are part of like in that scene of things, like where it's maybe someone's maybe part of someone's funnel to build their audience?
Yeah, definitely. My clients are all using it as marketing collateral.
Okay.
Exactly. Yeah. And, from that standpoint, you could write an ebook. It doesn't have to be a print version, big, thick copy, big, thick book that you're writing, you're selling on Amazon. It could be an ebook that you have as a downloadable PDF on your website, and you can even charge for that. You can just set up a little paywall there for that kind of thing right on your website. And more people, you're right, are going the self-publishing route. These days, and for good reason, I think, because the traditional publishing houses, first of all, they take much longer, and by the time you go through those channels, you better have a really evergreen book on your hands if you're going that direction, because it's going to be 5-10 years before anybody sees that book. But also, people think that the traditional publishing houses help you market your book. And in fact, they don't do very much marketing at all for you. You're still expected to do all the marketing. The first question they'll ask you is, how are you going to sell 25,000 copies of this book? And so there's a lot of pressure there if you try to go that direction. And so a lot of people are just choosing self-publishing. It's so easy. You can just put the book up on your website yourself, or you can go to Amazon and go through the formatting, and then people can actually buy a physical copy. Or copy for their Kindle. And it's a really easy way to distribute, get lots of people to read the book that wouldn't otherwise have access to it.
So are you helping more people like with like that smaller ebook, or more like a bigger book, or like what is like, where do you enjoy spending most of your time, Emily?
Yeah, I love to help people. I always recommend that if you're writing a business book, you want something like 40,000 words or so. And that's about 100 to 150 pages when it's printed.
Okay.
And I think that kind of book is good length for business books, because we like to digest a business book in a few hours. I think most people don't want to spend months of their lives reading a business book. They want the lessons, they want them to be there, pull them out, take notes, and apply those lessons to their lives and their businesses. So the best business books are those that are set up that way. So I could read it on a Saturday afternoon, or I could read it on a flight, flying somewhere.
Okay.
Yeah, so those are most of my clients are looking in that direction. Mm-hmm.
So who are most of your clients? Like who do you mostly help? I mean, in terms of, the listeners here, I mean, there's salespeople that are, producing sales. There's other entrepreneurs, there's business owners. So what would you say to someone that's, they've never written a book? Maybe it's not even on their, maybe they've never even thought about it. They just see best-selling books and they're like, I'm never going to do that. So what would you say to that person that wants to grow their business and to get more attention through this medium?
Yeah, so anybody can write a book, and to be honest, there are a lot of different ways to do it. You can work with a writer if you really are averse to writing it yourself, but you can also record your voice. The text to or the voice to text software these days is really amazing. So it's not hard at all to speak through your book. If, for example, you're better at speaking through thoughts than sitting and writing. Because sometimes we get into our head a lot when we're writing. It's we become kind of complicated. We go back to our English 101 days and we think, "Ooh, let me write, a paper," and it's not at all that way. In fact, the more conversational your writing is, the easier it will be for your audience to digest. So that's the first thing I'd say. But I'd also say that a really good way to start writing a book is to start writing shorter pieces that can be sort of stitched together into book form. You could take, I know lots of people who have taken their LinkedIn posts, for example, and turned them into a book. And, those are just seeds of ideas. It's not like you're going to have a chapter that's as short as a LinkedIn post.
Right.
But you can grow it from there. Or if you have a blog is another good way to start working on your book. And the nice thing about it is, I always encourage people to talk about their books as much as possible, as soon as possible. people sometimes are afraid to get feedback. But the more feedback you have on your ideas, the easier it will be to write it, because they'll spark ideas in your head when you're talking to them. And also, you'll get more comfortable. You'll know what ideas actually have legs. And so you can always go to your blog posts and see what the most popular ones are. That's a great way to get a book idea started. And then, you can write it as slowly or as quickly as you want. And, there's really so much flexibility. But I always like to tell people too that a book is a snapshot of your brain. So it doesn't make a lot of sense to spend 3 years writing a book. You really want to get in and get out, and you'll feel so amazing once you have a complete draft. So you set yourself a word count limit, and you just try to get there as quickly as you can. And then you have plenty of time to edit and all of that. But if you write a book over too much time, you'll be so tempted to edit what you first wrote that every time you'll just be re-editing. That first chapter will be like a masterpiece, and the rest of the book will be, incomplete thoughts. So, getting to that first draft is kind of the big milestone. And if you can get there, then you can finish the book.
A book is a snapshot of your brain.
Yeah.
That's interesting. I like that.
Yeah, I mean, our thoughts move, right? And you're going to change your mind, but you can always write another book if you change your mind. So get to that first draft as quickly as you can. That's my advice for DIY authors.
Yes. So when it comes to the ghostwriting piece, what is that process? Let's say, Bill's an entrepreneur. Let's say he's starting a coaching business, right? Mm-hmm. What does that process look like for him if he's working with you? I think that's going to be really helpful for the listeners.
Sure. Yeah. So my process is 16 weeks. So 4 months. You start with an outline, and it could be a very high level outline, just basically ideas of chapters that you want to have in your book. But it's helpful to have a kind of big picture of what you want the book to be. So you can tell me what it is, and I can wrap my mind around the idea. That takes some time on my end, because I'm not the expert, you're the expert, and you have to get that into my head. But we would meet weekly during that 16 weeks. Okay. I like to, going with the snapshot of your brain idea, I like to get to a draft in 8 weeks. And so then we have 8 weeks to edit it and to make it really great and perfect. And often I find that you don't always know the big picture or the real nuggets and the threads that you want to pull through until you get to the end. Like, those things come as in the process of writing. We do a lot of thinking when we're writing as well. So I always tell people that as well. If you sit down at your computer and you're like, I don't know what to write, start writing. It'll come, right? If you try to sort of map out the whole thing in your brain, it's not going to be as successful as just, what's the first smallest thing you could say about this topic, and just start there and keep going. So we get to the full draft in 8 weeks, then we do the editing, and at the end you have a complete manuscript that you can take to Amazon to publish, or you can go and find your traditional publisher if that's the route you want to go.
Now, do you help market that book then too, or is it more the ghostwriting, the process?
Yeah, it's just the content of the book. That's the main thing. I have, of course, resources, and I often set up clients with the marketing people. I know somebody who helps authors get on the bestseller list on Amazon, for example, and she's a really great marketer. So there are folks out there who specialize in that, for sure.
Okay, cool. Are there any myths when it comes to writing books? Like, you've worked with a ton of different people, mm-hmm. and when you approach something you've never done before, mm-hmm. This has happened for me before in the past. Like, let's say I purchase, some product or whatever, and I always thought, and somebody put an idea in my head and I held on to that, but no one told me, but maybe I created it myself. Like, what are some myths when it comes to writing books?
Yeah, it's a good question. I'll say a myth about ghostwriting is that you don't need to do any work to get a book that sounds like you. And in fact, I think sometimes my clients are surprised. And some of them are excited, actually, to be a part of the process, to be an intimate part of the process. But I think others are a little bit surprised that they need to tell me as much as they need to tell me. But I'm not a mind reader, and I need to make a book that really sounds like you. We've got to have a lot of conversations about what you think. And so I think, I try to make it fun. I like it to be a collaborative process. In the end, it's a kind of a mind meld. So that's one myth. I think another myth is one that I mentioned already, is that, you can make a lot of money selling your books in the business world. And that's, not usually the case. So I think most authors sell less than 500 books total. So it's just good to know the realities of, what you're getting yourself into if you want to write a business book.
Correct. And if you want to be a writer, if somebody truly wants to be a writer, like yes, you might start maybe with you, Emily.
Yeah.
but if someone's going to be an author and they really want to write these books, this is them crafting their own skills. Like, yes, you might be able to, you might help them maybe form a process to get that first book up and running. But if you want to write books, like, you need to write every day.
Yes. Yeah. If you want to put out several books, that's absolutely true. And writing also gets easier the more you do it. So that's another good reason to set a goal of writing every day, or, if your goal is to become a writer, like you said, or your goal is to become an author, that's definitely the way to go. Yeah.
Now you said you also help individuals with LinkedIn. Is that correct? You help them?
Yeah.
Is it like their brand or their profile? Tell us a little bit about how you help individuals with LinkedIn.
Yeah, sure. So prior to the pandemic, I got most of my ghostwriting business through in-person networking and referrals, things like that. So when the pandemic hit, I said, okay, I got to move all this to LinkedIn. So I really started using LinkedIn seriously, and I developed kind of a process for myself. And I think it works for thought leaders. People don't always realize the value of using LinkedIn. But you can definitely create a presence there, and it's a networking platform. That's what it's for. So if you treat it in that way and you align your goals to it being a networking platform, you can really see a lot of growth for your business. So my only goal when I started was consistency. I wanted to show up Monday through Friday every day, and I started doing that, and now I've been doing that for two plus years. And so I decided, I've got a lot that I learned. I could probably share it with other people. So I offer content creation and strategy services for LinkedIn. I can write posts for you. We could do the blogging with, or, you could have LinkedIn posts with or without the blogging as one of the packages. And it's a great way for people who are interested in becoming speakers, or who just, want to become thought leaders within their field, to, start building a community and building a following.
LinkedIn is absolutely amazing. I love LinkedIn.
Yeah.
And it was probably about a year and a half that I really started getting active.
Nice.
And I went through my calendar. I did like a year-end review in January, and I looked back at my calendar, and I had met over 50 different people from all over the world.
Right.
Just doing like a Zoom, like this is on StreamYard, but pretty much the same kind of streaming, kind of just video. Right. Mm-hmm. And it's so cool getting to learn, just Emily, like who you help and how you help them. Yeah. That's really cool. If I have a conversation in the next 2 to 4 weeks with someone, entrepreneur, and they're looking to build their business, and maybe they haven't done anything on LinkedIn, maybe they, mm-hmm. They don't have any kind of strategy or process on how to build their community. Because ultimately, every single business owner, every single entrepreneur, if you're not building a community, someone else is building that community. They're taking people away from the community that you're looking to build. So whether it's either as an entrepreneur or a business owner, the Language of Excellence podcast, like that's a community right there. Like these are people listening to this information. It's interesting. I've had a ton of authors and sales professionals. So you're the first ghost writer on here, which is really cool. But when people are getting more active in their process with LinkedIn, that almost works the same way, hand in hand with writing a book. Like you start to understand more about, all right, no, this is who I am. This is not who I am. This is what I do. This is not what I do. Like, because you need to define that. Because if you can't define it, then you're just going to be one other connection out of 5,000 connections that I have, and I don't know who you are. I don't know what you do, but if you start telling me, start giving me a story, posting every day. All right, this is a thought I had. This is a process. This is a client that I helped. Just pretty much just sharing your business as you're building your business. Then your community gets to know you. So you help people craft that, putting processes together. That's super cool. I mean, I've mostly just been doing probably like when you started, right? With the pandemic is a lot of trial and error, like, oh, I'll try this for 60, 90 days, and I'll try this for 60. And eventually you start to like figure out your own little cadence, I guess you could say.
Yes.
And it's like, you know what, this works. And I mean, video itself is, and I didn't like dig too deep into your LinkedIn profile, but like video is so powerful.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I do an interview series called Own Your Expertise, and it's really been great. You know, once a week I have often once a week I'll have a little interview that I share. And yeah, video is really powerful. Your content is really important on LinkedIn, but there's also all these little tricks. You know, if you post around the same time every day, you start to build a following. You know, if you make sure to include 3 hashtags in your posts, like, you know, that helps with the algorithm and all of that. And there's so many little tricks that, you know, you learn along the way, but, you know, you can learn so much more quickly if you engage someone like me to sort of help you figure out that strategy. And, you know, you and I met on LinkedIn. So, you know, that's a testament to how powerful it is.
It absolutely is. And this is, and anyone listening to this, there's power just right now. If you're listening, maybe you're watching this on YouTube. If you're listening to this right now, I am talking to Emily for the first time. Like, I didn't like meet her for coffee last week. Like, hey, we're going to talk about this like she booked the link for my podcast. She gave me some information about herself. Boom. Now we're talking. And now I get to learn about you. My audience gets to hear about ghostwriting, like what you do. There's so much value there. There's so much value.
Right. Absolutely. Yes.
So what is the best way for people to reach out to you, Emily?
Yeah, well, I love to connect with people on LinkedIn, of course. You can find me, Emily Crookston, right there on LinkedIn. And you can check out my website. It's thepocketphd.com. There you can find out more information about all my services. You can read my blogs. You can reach out to me if you have questions.
Perfect. And then I'm going to put Emily's information in the show notes. So if you're listening to this on the podcast and you want to get, you know, her email or the website or you know, look into the different courses that she offers, go into the show notes. All that information is going to be there. Our goal here with the Language of Excellence is to lead you to the right information. And if you can start to utilize that information into your life, you'll have a better outcome if that's your goal. So is there anything else that you'd like to add, Emily?
No, I think that covers it. Thanks for having me, Nick.
All right. Thank you so much. Have a wonderful day.
Thanks. Bye.
Bye.